The following presentation is a teaching by Avraham Emuna. Isaiah 7. The prophecy of Immanuel and its fulfillment in Hezekiah's reign. Isaiah 7 recounts a moment of intense political turmoil in the history of Judah. The southern kingdom of Judah, ruled by King Ahaz, was threatened by the alliance of Rezin, king of Aram, and Pekah, king of rebellious northern Israel. In this context, God sent the prophet Isaiah to reassure Ahaz of his divine protection over the house of David, promising that the kingdom would not fall to these adversaries. Central to this prophecy is the sign of Immanuel, meaning God with us, symbolized by the birth of a child. The sign of a promised son, Isaiah 7 verse 14 proclaims, "And he said, Listen now, O house of David, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the young woman shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Immanuel." This verse has been the subject of much debate, often interpreted as being fulfilled in Jesus Christ in later Christian tradition. However, in its historical context, the prophecy refers to a child born in the lineage of David, offering a tangible sign to the house of David at that time that God would preserve them despite external threats. The promise is made specifically to the house of David, and it is to David's kingly line that Isaiah says God will give you a sign regarding the current threat. This direct reference to the kingly line of David is evidence that the promised son is going to be a son from the line of David in Isaiah's own day. This shows that any interpretation that portrays the promised son being a child born centuries later, or that the child is born to the prophet Isaiah himself, has no warrant at all. Isaiah's son was never of the kingly line of David. Hezekiah, the fulfillment of the Immanuel prophecy. As we analyze the prophecy, it becomes evident that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, is the candidate to fulfill this role of Immanuel. Hezekiah, unlike his father Ahaz, would become a righteous king who trusted in the Lord and led Judah in faithfulness. Ahaz, despite receiving the prophetic word, failed to trust in God's deliverance, instead placing his faith in foreign alliances with Assyria. In contrast, Hezekiah became known for his faithfulness to the Torah, reforming the religious practices in Judah and turning the nation back to God. Isaiah's prophecy of a child to be born to a young woman or maiden can be understood as pointing to a woman within the royal household, likely a young maiden or concubine of Ahaz, who would later give birth to Hezekiah. The prophetic declaration was given in the time of the threat from Rezin and Remaliah, the years just before Hezekiah was born. Hezekiah, as a descendant of David, fulfilled the kingly expectation of the Immanuel prophecy by assuming the throne and proving to be a leader who knew how to refuse the evil and choose the good, per Isaiah 7 verse 15. The historical timeline: Assyria's threat and Judah's deliverance. The prophecy of Isaiah 7 occurred during the Syro-Ephraimite War, when the northern kingdom of Israel, under Pekah and Aram under Rezin, sought to coerce Ahaz into joining their coalition against Assyria. Isaiah's message to Ahaz was clear: do not fear these two kings, for they would soon be overthrown. Within a short time, Assyria defeated both Israel and Aram, neutralizing the immediate threat. Hezekiah, born around this time and ascending the throne after Ahaz's death, inherited a kingdom still under the shadow of Assyrian dominance. However, in his reign, Judah experienced a dramatic deliverance from the Assyrian threat. Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, laid siege to Jerusalem, but Hezekiah's faith that God is with us, Immanuel, proved decisive. According to 2 Kings 19:35-36, an angel of the Lord struck down 185,000 Assyrian soldiers, and Sennacherib was forced to withdraw. This miraculous deliverance solidified the notion of God with us, the literal manifestation of the Immanuel prophecy now coming to complete fruition. Curds and honey fulfilled in Hezekiah's time. Isaiah 7:15 further describes the child Immanuel, stating, "He will eat curds and honey when he knows how to refuse the evil and choose the good." This detail points to the abundance and prosperity that would come to Judah after God's intervention against their enemies. After the defeat of the Assyrians, Judah experienced a period of peace and material wealth. The invading Assyrian army was plundered, and the spoils of war enriched the land. The imagery of milk, curds, and honey signifies not just sustenance, but abundance, something that would have been a stark contrast to the period of fear and scarcity during the Assyrian siege. The abundance of curds and honey was not merely a metaphor, but a reality experienced in Judah after their divine rescue. As Isaiah reads in chapter 7, verse 22, "And it shall be, because of the plentiful milk produced, that he shall eat cream, for everyone left in the land will eat cream and honey," thus literally fulfilling the promise of eating curds and honey, a sign of abundance that came because of Hezekiah's faith as the promised son. Hezekiah's role as a king of David's line. Hezekiah's role as a descendant of David is critical to the interpretation of the Immanuel prophecy. God's covenant with David guaranteed that his dynasty would continue, and Isaiah's prophecy reassured the house of David of God's enduring protection, that God is with us. Hezekiah, born into the royal line, was the fulfillment of that promise. His righteousness, in stark contrast to his father Ahaz's idolatry and lack of faith, demonstrated that the kingship of David would be preserved and that the Immanuel child would indeed signify God's continued presence with Judah and the house of David. Isaiah's prophecy in chapter 7, given during the turbulent reign of Ahaz, finds its immediate fulfillment in the life and reign of Hezekiah. The child born to the royal household of David, known as Immanuel, symbolized God's faithfulness to his covenant and his deliverance of Judah from its enemies. Hezekiah's reign, marked by righteousness and divine intervention against Assyria, brought peace and prosperity to Judah, fulfilling Isaiah's vision that the child would eat curds and honey. In Hezekiah, we see the embodiment of the Davidic promise, a king who, unlike his father, rejected evil and chose the good and brought salvation to his people. Part 2. Hezekiah as the fulfillment of Isaiah 9 promise of a child born to us. In Isaiah chapter 9 verses 6 to 7 we encounter one of the most well-known and oft-quoted prophecies. "For a child has been born to us, a son given to us, and the authority is upon his shoulder, and the wondrous advisor, the mighty God, the everlasting Father, calls his name, the Prince of Peace. To him who increases the authority, and for peace without end, on David's throne and on his kingdom, to establish it and to support it with justice and with righteousness." While these verses have long been interpreted in the context of messianic expectations, the immediate historical context of Isaiah's prophecy points directly to a king born in Isaiah's time, a Davidic ruler whose reign would bring peace, justice, and deliverance to Judah. When understood within the historical framework, the most immediate fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9 is found in King Hezekiah. This righteous king's reign in Judah reflects many of the characteristics described in this passage, and his rule brought a remarkable period of peace and divine protection, making Hezekiah the natural candidate for this prophetic promise. A child born to us. Hezekiah's further connection to the prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6 opens with the proclamation that to us a child is born, to us a son is given, which directly parallels the earlier prophecy in Isaiah chapter 7 about the birth of a child, Immanuel, as a sign to the house of David. Hezekiah, born to King Ahaz, represents the continuation of the Davidic line and thus fulfills the expectation of a royal child who will rise to leadership. Hezekiah's birth would have been seen as an answer to the threat facing Judah in Isaiah's time. King Ahaz's failure to trust in God left Judah vulnerable to its enemies, but Isaiah's prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9 points to the birth of a child who would reverse this state of affairs. Hezekiah, as a son of David, embodies the hope of restoration and renewal for the kingdom of Judah. The government on his shoulders. The prophecy further states that the government will be upon his shoulder, Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6. This phrase symbolizes the responsibility of rulership and the burden of leadership. Hezekiah indeed carried the weight of leadership during a crucial and tumultuous time in Judah's history. After the death of his father Ahaz, who led Judah astray by engaging in idolatry and political alliances that weakened the kingdom, Hezekiah ascended to the throne and immediately began reforms that would restore the spiritual and political integrity of the nation. Hezekiah's rule was characterized by efforts to re-establish the Torah and the proper worship of God, purging the land of pagan practices and reinstating the proper observance of the law of Moses. These reforms re-centered Judah on its covenantal relationship with God and helped restore the nation's identity as God's chosen people. In addition, Hezekiah's ability to withstand the Assyrian threat through his faith in God demonstrates his pivotal role in upholding the governance and security of Judah. The increase of his government and peace. Isaiah chapter 9 verse 7 declares that of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end. This reference to an expanding government and enduring peace speaks to the ideal of a prosperous and just rule. While Hezekiah's reign was not without challenges, his reforms and his reliance on God ushered in a period of relative peace and prosperity for Judah. Following the defeat of Sennacherib's forces, Judah entered a time of stability. Hezekiah's reign is notable for its spiritual revival, political strength, and the kingdom's ability to withstand the dominant world power of the time, Assyria. The increase of his government can be understood in terms of the strength and influence Judah maintained under his leadership, while the peace is reflected in the divine protection that preserved the nation in the face of seemingly insurmountable odds. Establishing justice and righteousness on David's throne. The prophecy in Isaiah chapter 9 ends with a promise that the throne of David will be established with justice and righteousness from this time forth and forevermore. Isaiah 9:7. Hezekiah's commitment to justice and righteousness is evident in the reforms he enacted, which sought to restore the worship of God and cleanse the nation of idolatry. His actions demonstrate a return to the covenantal principles of justice, where the king ruled according to the laws of God and sought the welfare of his people. Although Hezekiah's own personal reign did not last forever, his faithfulness to God laid the groundwork for future generations and affirmed God's covenant with the house of David. In conclusion, Isaiah 9:6-7 finds its immediate historical fulfillment in the reign of King Hezekiah. Born to the house of David, Hezekiah's leadership embodies the qualities described in the prophecy, a ruler who brought peace, justice, and righteousness to Judah. Hezekiah's wisdom, faith in God, and commitment to reform made him the Prince of Peace for his generation. While the prophecy in Isaiah 9 also carries forward-looking messianic implications for the house of David, Hezekiah represents the specific fulfillment of these promises within his historical context, providing a tangible example of God's faithfulness to his people. With all of these points in mind, one should strongly reconsider interpreting these scriptures through a Christian lens. The historical Jesus in no way relates to any of the key prophecies laid out by Isaiah, while King Hezekiah, on the other hand, plays a substantial role in Isaiah's prophecy. Thank you for watching. This has been a presentation of Abraham Eminer. The views expressed here are mine alone and are not meant to be an authoritative representation of any one religious tradition.